Coming to you from Guthrie City Hall, this is the Roundup.
Hello and welcome everyone to our second installment of the Roundup. I'm your host, Chris Evans. Today we get to visit with two of our legislators here in Guthrie and Logan County. Visiting with today is A.J. Griffin, District 20, the Senator, and Representative John Pfeiffer, District 38. Once again, thank you for joining us here.
Hi, Chris. Glad to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome. Got a few questions around the board, but I think we'll start off with a little bit of how the legislative process works. I know a lot of people hear bills and bills passing, subcommittees. It's really kind of a unique process, and just kind of go over how that works.
Most of these ideas, and a lot of people ask, where do you get these ideas from? Everybody assumes they come from lobbyists, special interest groups, personal things that we want to see passed. Most of the best bills I've ever run have been ideas that constituents have brought to me, and the process starts early on. We submit kind of basic ideas, kind of broad outlines of what our bill is going to be back in December, and we continue through right up until right before session when we file substantive language. Then it goes through, gets assigned to committees. In the House side, we pass it out of the House committee, pass it over to the Senate, pass it out of the House, and send it over to the Senate.
Well, and then we have just finished week 9 of the legislative session. And during this process, we're at the point where we've switched the bills. So the bills that originated in the Senate have now been sent over to the House of Representatives and vice versa. So we're considering the legislation from the other chamber. It's got to go through that process. If a bill doesn't get changed and it's passed out of both chambers, it can go directly to the governor. But what usually happens is they're amended and changed, and then we have to swap them back, because both chambers have to pass a matching bill. They have to be exactly the same thing and passed off the floor for what we call final passage. A lot of citizens are always concerned because it seems like we're passing thousands of new laws. In all reality, at the beginning of a session, there'll be a couple of thousand ideas presented, and through the process, we whittle those down to about 200 changes in Oklahoma law. And the vast majority are not new laws. They're actually making amendments to things that are currently on the books to modernize, to improve on it, and to implement the things that our constituents want to see happen.
And we see some bills pass in March and April, some much later time. Is it just through the process of what speeds up?
Yeah, it's the process and how we have to go through the committee process. We have deadlines along the way, and if it doesn't meet that deadline, then it goes away, and we'll have to bring that idea up again. If something is failed at any point in the process, so that idea is voted down, it goes away. And we can't bring that idea back until a subsequent legislative session. And actually, not even just a session, but the next legislature. And we have 2 sessions for each legislature, which represents the 2 years that House of Representatives serve before they have to run for re-election.
And I mean, in terms of how fast something gets through, a lot of times it depends on how complex an idea is. Yeah. We spend a lot of time, or at least there's several bills run every year, just simply repealing old laws that are still on our books. Things regarding things as variety as pocket watch regulations and things like that doesn't necessarily have a huge place in American society anymore. Most of that stuff isn't really amended. It can move through the process a little faster. Some of the bigger ideas, have amendments, just take a little more time for everybody to get their say in, and it just slows the thing. Well, not necessarily slow it down, but takes a little longer for everybody to agree on the best way to move forward.
Okay, we'll move on. And AJ, I know you've been a big part of this Medicaid process here. The Oklahoma Healthcare Authority has proposed cutting provider reimbursement rates for Medicaid by 25%. Nursing homes have indicated this could cost them thousands of dollars per day, stop accepting Medicaid patients, and staff reductions. Where do we stand on this topic?
Well, the first thing I want to say is the chances we'll have a 25% rate reduction in any area of healthcare are very slim. It's the responsibility of the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority to notify the people that run the businesses that provide healthcare in the state of Oklahoma that there will be a rate change. They went worst case scenario in that announcement, which I think was actually the responsible thing to do. That is the worst case scenario. We're working really hard to make sure that we come nowhere near that. And the people of Guthrie should be very proud Tandy Hastings that runs the facilities here in Guthrie and in Stillwater, in Perry, and in Stillwell for the Chapel family, is currently the president of the Long-Term Care Association. And Tandy is working very diligently. She and I have lots of conversations about how we're going to protect long-term care in particular. Their rate right now is barely enough to keep care, appropriate level care for some of our neediest citizens, and we want to protect them and ensure that we can keep them safe and healthy in our facilities, and that we keep facilities all across the state open. And they're working really hard. We've had something pretty exciting occur, though, when it comes to healthcare in Oklahoma, and that's Nico Gomez, who's the director of the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority, responsible for running the Medicaid program in Oklahoma, rolled out a plan that we're referring to as the Medicaid rebalancing plan. It's a five-step process. It's very, very complicated. Tandy may be the person in Guthrie that knows it as well as I do, but that plan would allow us to access some additional support from the federal government to provide health care to more Oklahomans, reduce the number of uninsured Oklahomans, and change people off of the Medicaid program and into the private health insurance market, which should be exciting for all of us, because when we have a better payer mix and fewer recipients of a government service and more recipients of a private market public market service, that it's better for all of us, and it's going to ensure that we can keep health care available to everybody in Oklahoma.
Representative Pfeiffer, a report from the Center of Budget and Policy Priorities shows Oklahoma for the second straight year leads the nation in the deepest pure pupil state funding cuts to education since the recession of '08. Why have we seen this trend, and how the heck do we stop this thing?
And we've talked before about the challenging things about looking at education numbers. I think it's important to point out that last year we spent more total dollars in Oklahoma education than we ever have before in the state's history. We also have increased students, and people like to refer to 2008 or 2010, and it's important to keep in mind that since 2008 and since 2010, every school in the state of Oklahoma has started a pre-K program, a 4-year-old program. And as these kids work their way into the formula, they don't just count for one student. The way they figure the program, they actually count for 2 students. So not only are we spending more money and we've naturally increased the amount of students, we've actually added programs that add 2 students for every one into the formula. And this is something that we have to address. I think one of the things we have to look at when we look at education funding is the amount we're spending in necessarily some of these larger, not so much here, but in some of these larger Oklahoma City, Tulsa type school districts where they're spending just massive amounts on administration. Tulsa also announced in the Tulsa World that they're laying off 172 administrative positions. Most of my schools are lucky if they have 2 administrators, much less 172 that they can do without. It's really become we've politicized education. It's become a hot button issue, but it's really starting to split down rural-urban lines as rural Oklahomans are going, okay, our school boards have managed our schools properly. We're spending, on average, across my district, including Guthrie, around 11% on administration cost, which is low, whereas these Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Broken Arrow school districts are continuing to skyrocket. Some of that has to do with some of the federal programs that were levied on. It became easier to hire administration to make sure that we met certain federal credentials and stuff that used to just be handled by clerical staff. As they've started to rework some of the No Child Left Behind acts, we have to make sure as responsible citizens that we go back and unroll some of this administration costs that has crippled some of our largest school districts. Because at the end of the day, the money's not getting back to the kids in the classroom where it needs to get to.
Just tough situations that revenue failure has brought on the state.
So far this year, with the 2 revenue failures, and we don't anticipate a third, public education has been spared and had the smallest percentage of decline in funding of all of the state agencies. And that will continue as we try to balance the budget for next year.
AJ, many Oklahomans now shop online, including myself, for convenience and on-site delivery. However, only 4% report their sales tax, which costs Oklahoma an estimated $15 million a year. Store owners say they're not playing on equal playing ground. Your thoughts on the internet sales tax?
This has been a conversation that's happened on the federal level for
Yes.
quite some time, and the federal government has failed to address it. It is their responsibility to oversee interstate commerce, and it just hadn't happened. Most Oklahomans are honest when they file their taxes, but they're just like you, Chris. They didn't realize you were supposed to do that.
Yeah.
There is a line on your Oklahoma tax return for you to fill in and send and add the amount that you owe in sales tax for online purchases. Now, obviously, that's not something we can demand at this point, but what we can do is educate the public. And there are pieces of legislation that would make it easier to comply. One in particular would have that online merchants must provide to their customers a record of what they bought the previous year so that you can figure it out. If you're like me, I don't remember what all I bought on Amazon.
I'll purchase stuff at 2 o'clock in the morning and realize, oh wow, I forgot that package is here.
And it is, because it's bad for Main Street, Oklahoma, whenever they're competing with a competitor that starts with a nearly 10% advantage in price. And but we've got to have our citizens step up. And right now, for the time being, it's kind of the honor system.
Yeah. John, Oklahoma now is one step away from being able to buy wine and cold beer in grocery stores. If approved, voters will decide what to vote in November. Liquor owners say that would close their liquor stores down.
Senator Stephanie Bice brought this issue to everybody's attention. SJR 68 passed out of the Senate and is over in the House. It just passed out of the House Rules Committee. Will be coming up on the floor next week. All this is going to be doing is putting these proposed changes on the ballot and let the Oklahoma voters decide for themselves. The overwhelming opinion, or at least that's been expressed to me by my constituents and most people, is if nothing else, they want the choice to be able to vote for this, and they want wine and cold beer available in liquor stores. Oklahoma has some of the strictest laws on alcohol anywhere in the nation. They repealed the old joke is they repealed prohibition everywhere except Oklahoma back in the 30s. We've slowly been trying to change some of this and try to keep up with the times, but it's times now that we update this to fit in with the rest of the country. And I think as we've seen here in local ballot initiatives dealing with Logan County and issues on alcohol, this is a change that the people want.
It's important to remember in that one, too, that there is a provision to protect the retail liquor owners that are local. They would be allowed to sell things other than alcohol in their stores. So you could actually go get ice and an ice chest and a corkscrew, and that would be new. So they are receiving a little bit in the proposal.
State Auditor Gary Jones back in March said Oklahomans would be appalled to find out how much waste there is in state government. What are some of the areas that maybe you like to see reduced and moved on to different agencies, if you agree with that?
Well, I'll start with that. And the first thing I want to say is that in my experience, state employees are very hard. They're much like the city employees here in the city of Guthrie. Everybody's working very, very hard. And when you say there's waste in state government, we think of people, because the vast majority of what we spend as a state is on the people. And unless we're building a road or a bridge, we don't build a lot of things. We are simply providing employees to provide services for our citizens in public safety, in human services, in agriculture, in those areas, to oversee what we do as a state. I haven't found, we've got areas where we can tighten our belt, but over the last several years, we've tightened it pretty tight. And so now we're looking at, okay, how do we make sure that we have the funds available to us to pay for the things that we know are the core functions of government: education, healthcare, transportation, and corrections. And then support our neediest citizens through our safety net programs.
Another topic on money that comes up in the public a lot is the state capital and needing hundreds of millions of renovations, and people think, well, that money should go to education. I know it's a long, drawn-out process, I know it is, but that's what a lot of people think with the capital upgrades.
The capital upgrades, the proposal to pass another bond actually started out in the House. When they passed the first one a few years ago, before I was there, the capital was in a serious state of disrepair. As it was explained to me, the pass bond was the first step. This is the second step. We all know, as anybody who's done any kind of home renovations or anything like that knows, it's way more expensive to start a project, stop at the middle, and then start back as we go forward. Whether or not this is actually the right time, is slightly debatable. We do have some state bonds rolling off the books, so this would not increase our bond indebtedness. It would just replace some that we already have. And it is going to fix functions in the building, sewer, plumbing, things like that. It's not going to build an arc de triomphe or a reflecting pool or anything like that. These are core government, or well, these are core functions to keep the building functioning. Just this week, I was in an office that had a bowed ceiling tile, and it had been like that for a couple weeks. And I said, "Hey, is your roof leaking?" And we poked it, and a big chunk of concrete fell out. The building is literally falling down. A lot of the pipes, when they drilled holes through the marble to install indoor plumbing, the pipes have now rusted away, and the sewage is just flowing through the drilled out holes in the rock. There's some of these things that have to be addressed, or we're going to lose the building, and it won't continue to stand. And we don't build buildings like the state capitol anymore. We have to protect the ones we do have.
Moving on, I know you guys are extremely busy with your agendas, but you get watching a little bit of the presidential primary, and we're getting closer and closer to November.
Oh, boy.
I waited till the end.
Yeah. It's been entertaining,
Yeah.
to say the least. And now that Oklahoma's finished with their primary, we just sit back and watch. And on the Republican side, it'll be interesting to see what happens in Cleveland. And I do think it will be decided in Cleveland.
Yeah.
I don't know. I personally would just like to get a nominee so that my Facebook feed isn't filled up with everybody expressing their opinions, but that's just me. I do think it is encouraging, regardless of what your views, to see so many people who care about who the next leader of our country is going to be and take an active role in that. I know several of my friends who haven't been, my personal friends who haven't been political before, have taken an active interest, and this has brought them into other aspects of government, and they're like, "Oh, you're an elected official. What do you think about this?" And it's engaged them more in the process. And so if all the entertainment brings people more involved and it makes them, increases our voter turnout, then it's all for the best.
Any current updates where we get out here on your current bills, or anything you want to discuss before we...
I'm still continuing to work. We'll work on the autism reform. That's very important to me and to many members of this community, and I want to say a big thank you to the David and Tara Hood family for their advocacy work on this issue. Been a huge help working to make sure that we have appropriate access to services for our kids who learn differently so that they can thrive whenever they get to school. And I do want to encourage anybody that has any issue that they'd like to weigh in on to make sure to shoot me an email or a text, or just call the office. And I always hear, I may not be able to answer all the emails. I think last week we counted and we had about 3,200 emails that came into the office in that 1 week. But I do see them all, and if it's a constituent, we do make every effort to make sure we respond.
My cattle rustling bill is making its way. It's passed out of the Senate committees and is heading towards the Senate floor, and continuing to work within my subcommittee, trying to figure out where we can cut government, where we can merge things together. The Natural Resources and Regulatory Services A and B subcommittee, got it's a mouthful every time I say it, oversees about 15 different agencies. We're consolidating 2 of them this year to try to save some money and move things forward, just continuing to work on the budget. And please, again, like AJ said, if you have any issues, any concerns, email me, give me a call, and let me know if I can help you in any way.
That'll do it for our show here on The Roundup. We appreciate you tuning in, and always a big thank you to the producers back behind the cameras, Bill Miracle and Aaron Ryburn, for producing this. So we'll talk to you next time on the Guthrie Roundup.